Welcome to Between Two Chairs, Demystifying Commercial Real Estate, the podcast that brings you the latest insights and trends on the South Florida commercial real estate market, with your hosts, Fernando Arencibia Jr. and Jennifer Woolman. In each episode, we dive into the world of commercial real estate and break down complex concepts to make them accessible for everyone. Whether you're a real estate professional, a curious investor, or just interested in the South Florida market in general, Between Two Chairs is the podcast for you. So pull up a chair and join us.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Between Two Chairs. We always invite you to pull up a chair and join us. Today, we're going to invite you to pull up a smaller chair as we continue our kindergarten books series. My name is Fernando Arencibia, and with me, as always, is the very astute Jennifer Woolman. Jennifer, say hello.
Hi, I thought you were going to say they're very childish since we're in kindergarten.
Hey, that should have worked. So Jennifer, tell everybody what we're going to discuss today.
So again, we're continuing with our kindergarten series, and we're kicking off the beginning of summer, which is on June 20th. So we thought we would dedicate this episode to Dr. Seuss and Oh, the Places You'll Go. When we first thought of this book for this episode, I was thinking we would discuss like the Miami metropolitan statistical areas, ports and airports and trains, and talk about the travel information and their passenger count and how that connectivity really applies to, our commercial real estate here in Southeast Florida. But when you called me and said, hey, what should we focus on when we're discussing this book? Should we focus on the leadership lessons? So with that question, we decided to take it in a different direction because just like the Three Little Pigs, I think Oh, the Places You'll Go is actually a real estate book.
Interesting.
And the reason I say that is because it's a perfect and very short story for anyone in real estate. It addresses motivation. It addresses the ups and downs, the kooky people you'll meet. So when I read it, I'm like, oh, this is another real estate story set in kindergarten. And the reason I like it is because, we've discussed, you and I are both really big readers, and most of the people we know are really, really big readers. And there are a ton of great books out there on how to run a business, on how to buy real estate, on mindset, on focus, on habits, et cetera, et cetera. But I like to keep things simple, and you can't get more simple than kindergarten. So, yeah.
Well, but remember, we always say there is some truth that you learned everything in kindergarten.
Exactly.
There are very difficult topics that are addressed in this book by Dr. Seuss.
Right. To quote you, when you came in, you said, do you think is it just me, or is he a little bit effed up? So I'm curious as to...
No, I just, this is not a book that panders to its audience, right? It's a book that wants to teach an important lesson. I think it's a book about risk-taking. I think it's a book about understanding that things may not go your way as much as you want it to and as much as you will try to do so. But there is a decision that you have to make as to whether you are going to go for it or not. And, I just find it really interesting. And I don't know how to dive into the book because I don't know how much of our audience is going to remember. So maybe you can give us some...
by reading.
All right. Let's go.
Don't worry, I'm not going to read the entire book, but there were little things, to your point. I think
Right.
It's so weird because we didn't actually discuss the book. We discussed what we were going to discuss, but
Exactly.
or what slant we wanted to take. But It's funny because you raised a lot of things that I think we'll top on. So at the very beginning, I'm starting at the very beginning. Congratulations. Today is your day. You're off to great places. You're off and away. You have brains in your head. You have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself any direction you choose. You're on your way and you know what you know. And you are the guy or gal who'll decide where to go. You'll look up and down streets, look 'em over with care. About some you will say, I don't choose to go there. With your head full of brains and your shoes full of feet, you're too smart to go down any not so good street. and you may not find any you'll want to go down. In that case, of course, you'll head straight out of town. So I started with that, which is the very beginning of the book, because when I reread it, I thought of so many of the conversations that we've had with guests on our show. I thought of discussing fear and trusting your gut that we had with Beth Azor. I thought about, investing on the edge of scary with Dalee. So to your point about taking risk, what do those pages kind of talk to you about?
Have you ever daydreamed about what it would be like to go back to when you were younger? Like if you're in middle school or high school, how it would be different if you knew then what you know now? And I know you're looking at me like, what kind of a daydream is that? But
sounds like a nightmare.
I'm with you, but imagine going back knowing what you know now.
Right.
It's different. You would have a very different armor around you because of all of your life experiences. So anyhow, when I read this book, of course, it's a children's book. It's a kindergarten book, but now you can't divorce your own experience from it. So I think that when we read this book, you start to add your own bias and your own life experience through it. And of course, the beginning of the book is very optimistic, right? I'm going to go out. I'm going to go visit places. I'm going to enter this journey. It's a book about a journey, right? And at the beginning, hey, there are some places that look sketchy. Maybe you won't go there because you'll know better. Right. And then you'll just get out of town and keep moving forward. There's that aspect of keep moving forward. And I think to your point, the majority of the people that are in this industry, not the majority, but yeah, I would say the majority come from another industry, right? Mm-hmm. They started doing something else and then they came into real estate. And when you start, there's something really optimistic and romantic about the idea that I'm going to go on this journey. And I'm going to apply everything that I've learned in my life to this profession. And to me, that beginning of the story kind of mimics that, where, hey, there are places where I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do that. Let me keep moving forward. Let me stay in my lane. Let me figure it out. And that's what I thought about, because to me, this is like I said, I think this is a journey. This is a story about mindset. And about we're all in a journey in one way or another, right? Sometimes the places you'll go will be metaphorical. Sometimes the places you'll go will not be a place at all. It might be within yourself, mm-hmm. like things that you learn about yourself when you take risk, mm-hmm. And that's what I captured from the beginning.
Yeah, I thought, congratulations. The very first is like, yay, you decided you're going to invest, or you got your real estate license, or you got your first job or whatever it was that gets you all excited about the real estate process, whatever you're starting to undertake. And then the not being sure. And then I started thinking about, okay, so I remember Beth and I having a conversation about how after we had been in real estate for a while, we each separately had investments that our gut was telling us was right? We were boots on the ground. We knew the market. But then we were unsure. We had this doubt, and we started asking questions of people that we knew. And, hey, what do you think? And both of us separately with separate advisors or mentors were talked out of those. And those are still our regrets because we didn't trust our gut. So I love that line. You have brains in your head and feet in your shoes. You know what you know, and you are who you'll decide where to go. It's so true. You know your market, your boots on the ground. So at the end of the day, just trust in yourself. And eventually that trust in yourself with your brainy brains and shoes on your feet will lead you to great places where you're going to grow. And
but look at the start. He says you'll look up and down streets, look them over with care. About some you will say, I don't choose to go there, with a head full of brains and shoes, as you mentioned. And I think it's a great analogy to what you mentioned. Mm-hmm. That when you start something or you start a journey, you're very unsure, right? And you're going to pull to what you think is best, but you choose not to go down those streets because you don't know how to go down those streets.
Right.
You don't know how to navigate those things. You don't understand what the opportunity lies within those, right? And so again, the more I read this, the more brilliant I find it.
Oh, so you don't think he's as effed up as the original?
I still think he's messed up, right? But in a good way,
So to continue, eventually you're going to go to places that where you're going to grow. You'll be flying high, closing deals, having fun, meeting people, and the world will be great until it's not.
Right.
Because I'm sorry to say, but sadly it's true that bang-ups and hang-ups can happen to you. You can get all hung up in a prickly perch and your gang will fly on. You'll be left in a lurch. And when you're in a slump, you're not in for much fun. Unslumping yourself is not easily done.
I love that sentence. I love that sentence.
You get so confused that you'll start into race down long wiggled roads at a break-necking pace. I can't Dr. Seuss, people. And grind on for miles across weirdish wild space, headed, I fear, toward a most useless place. The waiting place. The waiting place. We don't want to be there. It's for people just waiting for a train.
But before you get to the waiting, this is where our hero, the story, if you will, encounters the first obstacles, right? Up to now, they have made all the right decisions, or so they have thought. They're flying high, they're leading the pace, they're doing well, and then they hit a slump, which I think it's it's just a great word to use there. And I love how he says, unslumping yourself is difficult and it's uncomfortable. And this is really a great lesson, right? Which is that, just because something is difficult and uncomfortable does not mean that there is no value there, right? In fact, everybody says that it is in the failures that you gain the most introspection, that you gain the most knowledge. That's really what experience is. Our experience, to me, is going from failure to failure and learning from it and continuing to move forward, right? I just love that the setup of what are you expecting when you're on this journey? What are you expecting when you're entering the industry? And I think there should be an expectation that, hey, you're gonna hit a wall, right? You're gonna run into difficult times. You're gonna have difficult deals. You're gonna have things that you are a little bit over your head. That happens to everyone that tries to push the envelope and tries something new. And and I think that there's a whole other lesson about the waiting room.
Right.
But what did you think about that? Because doesn't it hit you hard all of a sudden? Like, the story is going really nice, you're leading the way and you're like, wow, this is a very optimistic story.
And then he slams you head first into a wall. Yeah. So I love it because he talks about how you are going to face these challenges. And I love the word uncomfortable because I feel like when you're uncomfortable, that's a sign that things are either starting to change or need to change. And it's in that uncomfort that we go finding the next step, the next phase, the next experience, whatever it is. And so I think that's super important. You and I have talked about, when we make big moves or decide to do something drastically different or take things in a new direction, how scary that can be, and that we're okay with the fear as long as we address where it's coming from and kind of minimize. If it's risk, we acknowledge it and try to minimize the risk. But you and I are perfectly comfortable being uncomfortable. Like, we like being comfortably uncomfortable, I think is kind
But you would agree it takes time. And it takes a lot of life experience and experience in the business to get to that point
where you can be comfortable being uncomfortable, for sure. Right? And most people don't like it, which is why they end up in the waiting room.
Right. And before we get to the waiting room, there's a great sentence here, a couple sentences here that he explains, which I want to dive into. You will come to a place where the streets are not marked. Some windows are lighted, but mostly they're darked. A place you could sprain both your elbow and chin. But here's the question, right? Do you dare to stay out? Do you dare to go in? How much can you lose? How much can you win? And if I go in, should I turn left or right and 3/4, or maybe not quite? You start getting into your brain. But that really is the question. And I think it was Mike Tyson who says, everyone is a good boxer until they get punched. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, right? And I think that is the part that is important and really in any journey, but we see it very much in our business, right? Because brokers face very challenging things. And you always have to ask yourself, okay, so I've been through it. I've gotten to an uncomfortable place. There's only one way I either leave or I go through it. And as I go through it, the big decision is, do I continue? Right. Do I dare, like I said, do I dare to stay out or do you dare to go in? That, and I'm sorry to get too deep into this, but do you dare to stay out is the most impactful sentence there. Right. You know why? Because a lot of people believe that it's not daring to stay out. Well, stay out means, okay, I'm out of trouble, whatever it is. But the reason why it is asked that way is because there's a lot of pain on the other side of that, which is you could end up in the waiting room waiting for things to happen to you instead of you moving the action forward because you do not dare to go in. And so you have to ask yourself, do I dare to live a life where I'm not taking that risk?
Right.
And where I'm not making that jump.
Or opportunities. Right. Exactly.
So then we enter into the waiting room.
The waiting room. Uh-huh. For people just waiting for a train to go or a bus to come or a plane to go or the mail to come or the rain to go or the phone to ring or the snow to snow or waiting around for a yes or no or waiting for their hair to grow. Everyone is just waiting for the fish to bite or waiting for wind to fly a kite or waiting around for Friday night or waiting perhaps for their Uncle Jake or a pot to boil or a better break or a string of pearls or a pair of pants or a wig with curls or another chance. Everyone is just waiting. These 2 pages give me so much anxiety because I'm not a waiter. And when I do have to wait for something, either a response or something, it makes me crazy. I mean, just ask my poor hairstylist. I'm like, are we done yet? Are we done yet? So yeah, the waiting room is a place where you don't want to be. And I think it's interesting because think about COVID, think about the market that we're in now because of interest rate hikes. COVID pretty much shut the world down. A lot of people were just waiting to see what was going to happen, but a lot of people immediately pivoted and they couldn't wait, right? Probably because waiting made them, like me, anxious, right? No patience, no willingness to wait and see what happens. They just started moving and doing stuff. I think of Ashley Cusack, a residential agent who she just started doing, she had never really done a ton of social media, and she just started doing walking tours on Facebook and Facebook Live and everything just to keep busy, because how was she going to show her houses and sell them? I think of the Miami Association and how they did such a rapid pivot where everybody was working from home within, 48 hours maybe, and everybody was set up and services were being handled, and they kicked into gear with making sure that real estate was considered essential so people could get into condos if they were looking to rent or buy. We did the notary thing. So that to me is not stressful, right? Some people are like, oh my gosh, pivoting that fast, how stressful. Let's stop, let's think, let's wait a little bit. But so in here, they're saying, Dr. Seuss says, waiting for too long and taking a pause isn't necessarily bad, but waiting for everything to happen, like in this market, right? We've had the lowest amount of sales in residential sales since, 1992 or 3. And commercial sales, at the end of last quarter were down something like 80% from their peak. Mm-hmm. So, what are people doing? What are brokers doing? What are investors doing, right? Because investors still have money. They still want to invest. Yeah. But, deals are hard to come by because of the spread between the ask versus the interest rates and the buy. So what do you do?
It's an interesting thing because to your point about COVID, there was a weird amount of calmness in the middle of that storm, because when you are in the middle of a crisis, you sometimes have no choice but to answer with bold action, And so I think when you have that level of certainty that, hey, we have to act, even though we're going through something new, it does provide a certain level of calmness.
And I like what you said. You said certainty to act. It's not certainty. Like nobody had certainty about what the outcome of it was, just the certainty that we have to do something, right? So what do we do? So I
this thing about the waiting room reminded me, I have a friend who once told me there's only 2 mistakes you can make in life. One by omission or one by commission. And if you have a choice, it's better to make a mistake by commission. By omission, you don't do anything. Things just happen to you. You stay out of it. But if you make a mistake by commission, at least you were trying. You were, you were pushing. You were doing something. And the other thing that it reminded me here, and I'm sorry, I want to get a little, English teacher here, even though I never taught English. But there is a poem by T.S. Eliot called The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock. And it really is the story about a man who doesn't take chances. And at the beginning of the poem, there's a question posed: do I dare disturb the universe? And at the end of the poem, the question is, do I dare to eat a peach? Right? And what he is juxtaposing is, this is a man who started life with big ambitions and who ended life with very poor, he never took any of those chances.
Right.
He asked the question, and then at the end, the question was so minimal: do I dare to eat a peach? That it's insignificant to life, right?
So I think that's super interesting because, the waiting room, and in the waiting room, to me, it's all about how fear of the unknown can be paralyzing. And that opening statement, do I dare take on the universe? Wow, how powerful. And then how pathetic, do I dare to eat a peach? Right. Like, who even needs to think about that, right? So I think that what's important is that movement and having motion. So it's okay to be afraid. It's okay to feel paralyzed. How do you get unstuck? And that reminds me of, the first time I went to invest on my own with, just my husband and I was paralyzed with fear. I mean, we had our second property, we had already lost a first because I backed out at the last minute. Totally irrational fear. My gut was saying, go it. My brain was doing all the what ifs and those squirrely things that go on in your brain. And so I'm like, I finally recognized what the fear was and that it was irrational. But that even though it was irrational, my brain wasn't going to get around it. So I phoned a friend who I knew would be able to bail me out if I got into trouble. I didn't even tell him what I was doing. I just said, hey, I need you to answer yes to a question. And he was like, well, what's the question? And I said, would I ever do anything to hurt you, to hurt your family, to put you in a bad position, et cetera? And he answered, no, 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 no. And I said, so if I asked you a question for something that I need help on, what would your answer be? And he's like, well, what's the question? I'm like, that's the question. And he said, yes. And I said, thank you very much. I hung up the phone and I signed the contract. We bought that house. We bought another property. We bought, that's what unblocked me. Right. But if not, so I had to identify it because, again, like I said, I don't like waiting, but I had kind of been taking action, but then sabotaging myself, right? So, and that's really easy to do. We do that all the time. You might be on a run. I love to run. I'll be on a run and I'll be like, oh my gosh, your time stinks. Like, I can't believe you're only running this fast or whatever. And you have to get out of that mental loop. So, the brain has a funny way of trying to mess with you and test your limits. So as long as you find the way to get out of there, then you can.
I think sometimes you need a little bit of you're like a trapeze artist, and you need to know that there is some sort of net underneath you. And whether you'll ever use it or not, just knowing that it's there.
Exactly.
It's like Dumbo with the feather, it's like you just got to believe.
Right.
And
so if you ever find yourself in the waiting room, find out the safety net that you need to get you out of whatever is got you stuck.
And this is again where our hero, Dr. Seuss, goes into, no, that is not for you. The waiting room is not for you. Somehow you'll escape. You'll find the bright places. So now our hero is back on the journey. And again, things are going great.
It's a rah-rah moment.
Banner flip-flapping once more. You'll ride high, ready for anything under the sky, ready because you're that kind of guy.
Or gal.
Or gal. All the places you'll go, there is fun to be done. There are points to be scored. There are games to be won. And the magical things you can do with that ball will make you the winningest winner of all. Fame, you'll be famous as famous can be, with the whole wide world watching you win on TV. And I mean, things just keep, except when they don't. Because sometimes they won't. I'm afraid that sometimes you'll play lonely games too, games you can't win because you'll play against you. I mean, this is, he's messed up. Yeah, there's something messed up here. But yes, all alone, whether you like it or not, alone, you will be something, you'll be quite a lot. And when you're alone, there's a very good chance you'll meet things that scare you right out of your pants. There are some down the road between hither and yon that can scare you so much you won't want to go on. And that, again, I think that this is incredible because in our business, we often speak about there are peaks and valleys in the year of the life of a broker, and that, sometimes you got to do a lot of work to get to the peak, and sometimes you fall off on that work, and so then you have a valley, and what we always try to do is you want to have as many peaks and valleys, not so many wide ranging and so deep, right? Because there's always an ebb and flow. We don't ever say that we want to remove the peaks and valleys because that's impossible. And I think that that's what the story is talking about. Like, look, things, you're gonna hit a spot, you're gonna have to decide to go on. You go on, then things get better, but sometimes they won't, or sometimes they'll, you'll come to another reckoning. You'll come to another place where you are slumped and you're gonna be uncomfortable, and you gotta, get over that. And ultimately, I think that that's a big part of the lesson here.
Well, and to me, it's also the real estate. You can apply this to the real estate cycle, right? The real estate cycle is going up, 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 up. Everything's great. We're buying because prices are low, and all of a sudden everything's high. Oh my gosh, the numbers don't work. Can't buy anymore. Building stops, development stops, and then we go down, and then Yeah.
And I just love, you want to read this part. I know you had set it up.
Sure. So we're getting to the end, people. Thank you for your patience. On and on you will hike, and I know you'll hike far and face up to your problems, whatever they are. You'll get mixed up, of course, as you already know. You'll get mixed up with many strange birds as you go. There are a lot of strange birds in real estate. So be sure when you step with care and great tact, and remember that life's a great balancing act. You never forget to be dexterous and deft, and never mix up your right foot with your left. And will you succeed? Yes, you will indeed. 98.75% guaranteed. Kid, you'll move mountains. So be your name Bucksbaum, Bixby, or Bray, or Mordecai Alley, Van Allen, O'Shea. You're off to great places. Today is your day. Your mountain is waiting. So get on your way.
I love it. And I think that there is a lot of value in knowing what you're getting yourself into, but also knowing that the opportunity lies in taking that chance. And so that's why when I read the book yesterday, and look, I wasn't born in this country, so a lot of these books are somewhat new to me, right? So to me, it's actually a joy because it's a new discovery for me, But when I read this book, that's why I asked you if our topic today was really going to be about leadership, because it has to do with mindset. It has to do with going through it. And it's also about setting the right expectations. Like what I love about the book is that it's not an overly optimistic, unrealistic story. It really is a story about get on your feet, get moving, go in the direction that you want to go. You're going to hit some rough spots, but you'll be the better for it. One of the things that I noticed is that it takes them less time to overcome the second bump than the first bump.
Right.
And the first bump, he ends up in the waiting room, and then there's all this uncertainty. In the second bump, there seems to be a lot more, and I don't know if it was intentional, but I picked up on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what's super interesting about this is that most stories, have the hero and the villain and the guide. And in this one, the reader is both the hero, the villain, and the guide, right? It's almost like the whole book is about the reader itself. So I loved that. This was the first book I bought for my granddaughter as soon as she was born, because I just feel like it's got so many great life lessons in it. So thank you for playing in kindergarten with us today and joining our reading circle.
I also want to give a shout out to my English teachers, Miss Ferrer and Miss Feather from Miami High, who taught me about T.S. Eliot and all those great books that I read as I was learning English.
Mine too, Pat Pacheco. He was my English lit teacher in college in Santa Rosa, and he taught me great lessons, not just about English lit, but about life. And I remember a discussion that we were having, and he was talking about a movie that he had gone to see. I think it was Dumb and Dumber. And I was horrified because he had been my idol up until the time he told me that that's what he had done over the weekend. And I was like, are you kidding me? You went to see that movie? And
What's
he said,
his name?
Pat Pacheco.
Pat, you just elevated. In my mind, that elevated you to another level.
Well, then you're going to love his reason why. Okay. He said it was the #1 grossing movie for, I don't know, like 3 months or something in a row, or 3 weeks in a row or whatever. And you always need to know where the natives are. So if that was the #1, all of a sudden he went back up in my eyes. So
the natives were having fun.
The natives were having fun. Yeah. So do you have your fun fact?
No, I think I'm just going to quote scenes from Dumb and Dumber.
All right, so.
No, I'll tell you, I started looking at travel because, we've been monitoring this for a long time. And this is from the U.S. Travel Association that in 2023, foreign visits remain strong. They were up 24% year over year. We're still not getting the visits that we were before COVID, but we're getting very close to that number and then eventually exceeding that number, which I think, again, bodes well for our market and and the U.S. market overall.
You really scared me there for a minute because mine is also a travel stat. I was like, there is no way we got the same one again. So MIA, Miami International Airport, achieved its higher ever annual passenger total in 2023, handling 52.3 million travelers, which was a 3.2% increase over the previous year, which was also a record in 2022.
Well, guys, thank you for joining us on this episode and pulling up a chair. We would love to get some feedback from you. What other books do you want us to cover? We love doing these kindergarten series. I think it's a lot of fun, and I thank you, Jennifer, for always bringing it up. It's always fun to do these episodes. All right, guys, have a good one.
See you next time.